The late afternoon sun burned low over the dusty plains, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth, whispering secrets of the wild lands that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the small town of Redstone Creek, where wooden porches creaked under the weight of lonely chairs and the sound of a distant train echoed like a wandering ghost, a young woman with tattered clothes and calloused hands approached the edge of the settlement. Her name was Leora, and she carried with her nothing but a small bundle of belongings, a heart heavy with worry, and eyes that had learned to see the world in shades of hardship and hope. Leora had come seeking work. The gold of the town's bustling days had long faded, leaving behind empty storefronts and weary townsfolk who had learned to guard their hearts against strangers. She knocked on doors, spoke to shopkeepers, and offered herself as a helping hand, but each time the answer was the same. There was no work, not enough money, not enough kindness to go around. Her stomach ached with hunger, her shoulders ached with fatigue, and yet there was something in her gaze that refused to bow, something that made people look twice even as they turned her away. The sun was nearly gone when she found herself standing in front of a ranch that seemed almost lost to time. Its wooden fence was weathered but strong. The barn's roof sagged in places, yet held a quiet dignity. A few horses grazed lazily in the corral, their tails flicking at the flies that buzzed in the golden light. It was then she saw him, Azil, the Apache rancher, sitting on the edge of the porch in a simple chair, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes scanning the horizon with a quiet intensity that seemed to pull the very wind toward him. He was a man of few words, and the townsfolk whispered about him with a mixture of respect and unease. His past was as shadowed as the canyons of the desert, and his present carried the weight of solitude. When Leora approached, her heart thumped in a rhythm she could barely contain. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. "I was looking for work. Anything I can do, Azil's eyes met hers, dark and unwavering, and he rose with a quiet strength that made her pause. He measured her with a glance that seemed to see not just the clothes she wore or the dirt on her boots, but the fire in her heart, the resilience in her spirit. "Work?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "The only position I have is wife." The words struck her like a cold gust. Leora blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Wife?" she repeated, her voice trembling with disbelief and curiosity. I don't understand." Azil stepped closer, the boards of the porch creaking under his weight, and a faint smile touched the corners of his mouth. "I don't hire help," he said simply. "I only take a partner in life. If your heart is strong, if your soul can endure the harsh winds of this land and still bloom like the desert flowers in spring, then perhaps there is a place for you here." Leora's mind raced. She had come seeking bread and labor, not love or promises, yet something about Azil's presence unsettled her in ways she could not explain. His gaze seemed to pierce through the barriers she had built around herself, touching places that had been closed off for years. She felt both frightened and drawn to him, like a moth circling a flame that could either warm her or consume her. Around them the ranch hummed with life, the quiet sounds of horses shifting in their stalls, the faint clatter of tools in the barn, the whispering of wind through the old wooden beams. Leora felt the pulse of the land under her feet, raw and alive, and realized that this man was unlike anything she had known. She had faced hunger, she had faced rejection, but she had never faced a challenge that spoke so deeply to her spirit, nor a presence that made her heart race with both fear and hope. Azil's voice broke her thoughts. "It is not a simple life," he said, his tone serious now. "This land tests those who walk upon it. It will demand courage, patience, and love that is stronger than the storms that pass through. Are you willing to give all of that, if it means belonging?" Leora swallowed hard. She did not have the answers, nor the certainty, yet something inside her stirred a quiet, defiant hope that maybe, just maybe, this strange offer was more than it seemed. She had survived the town's cold indifference. She had endured hunger and fatigue, and she had learned to trust her own strength. Could she trust this man? Could she step into a life she did not yet understand, a life that promised love wrapped in challenge? The sun sank behind the horizon, leaving the sky awash in bruised purples and fiery oranges. Shadows stretched long across the ranch, merging with the darkness that crept silently through the corners of the land. Azil's eyes, glowing faintly in the fading light, never left hers. There was a promise in them, a warning and a pull that was impossible to resist. "I don't know if I can do what you ask," Leora said quietly, her voice trembling not from fear, but from the weight of possibilities. "I don't even know you. Yet." Azil stepped back, folding his arms, his gaze softening. "You don't need to know me fully. You only need to know if your heart is ready. That will be the truest test." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and dust, a whisper of the unknown. Leora felt her pulse quicken, her thoughts a whirlwind of caution and curiosity. She was standing at the edge of a life that could change everything, a life that offered love, danger, and the promise of belonging. The ranch seemed to breathe around them, alive with secrets and untold stories, as if the land itself waited for her answer. For a long moment they stood in silence, the world holding its breath. Leora's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a question, a challenge, a call to step forward or step back. The night crept closer, the first stars piercing the violet sky, and the distant howl of a coyote reminded her that this land was wild, untamed, and unforgiving. And yet in that moment something unspoken passed between them. A spark of connection, fragile yet undeniable, flaring against the darkness. Leora realized that her journey had led her here not by chance but by fate. The choice was hers, and the clock of her own courage ticked louder than any town gossip or whispered warning. As she looked into Azil's eyes one last time before the shadows fully claimed the porch, she felt a stirring of something she had never felt before: hope, anticipation, and the first whisper of love. But the path forward was uncertain. Would she step into the life he offered, surrendering to the land, to him, and to the unknown? Or would she turn away, back into the world of struggle and solitude that had shaped her? The answer hovered in the air, as fragile as the last light of day, waiting for Leora to make a choice. And as the wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of storms to come, the story of the poor woman and the Apache rancher was only beginning, a tale of love, courage, and the uncharted wilderness of the heart. The night was waiting, the stars were watching, and Leora's next step would decide everything. The first chill of night settled over the ranch, and the stars shone like distant fires in the vast, open sky. Leora remained on the edge of the porch, her hands gripping the worn wood railing, feeling both the pull of something new and the weight of all she had left behind. The town of Redstone Creek seemed a world away, with its empty streets and shuttered shops. Here, among the rolling plains and whispering winds, the silence was not lonely but full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Azil stepped inside the dimly lit cabin, and Leora followed, her curiosity mingled with caution. The air smelled faintly of leather, wood smoke, and the faint tongue of horses. The furniture was simple, functional, yet each piece seemed to tell a story of long days, of hard labor, of a man who had built his life with his own hands. She noticed a faded photograph on the wall, a family long gone, and wondered about the losses Azil carried silently, the heartaches that had shaped him into the man who now offered her a place she barely understood. He watched her carefully, sensing her mind spinning with questions she could not voice. "You want to understand, don't you?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something hidden. Leora nodded, unable to speak. "This ranch has been in my family for generations," he began, motioning toward the window that framed the darkening plains. "My father believed in the land more than anything else. He said the earth could give you everything if you respected it, and take everything if you disrespected it. I learned that lesson the hard way. I stayed when most would have left, kept what little we had alive, and waited." His eyes softened as if memories threatened to overwhelm him. "I waited for someone who could see beyond the dust and the work, someone who could see the life hidden in the struggle." Leora listened, feeling a mixture of awe and empathy. She had known struggle in every corner of her existence, the gnawing hunger, the whispered rejections, the lonely nights when the wind sounded like the echoes of lost dreams, but Azil's words carried a different weight. They were not just about survival. They were about endurance, about loyalty, about a love for life that had survived sorrow. She thought about her own past. Her childhood had been marked by loss, too, by the early death of her mother and the quiet neglect of a father who never understood her dreams. She had learned to fend for herself, to take what little she could from the world without complaint. And yet, standing in Azil's cabin, among the smell of leather and the quiet strength of the man before her, she realized that her heart had always longed for something more than mere survival. She had longed for belonging, for someone who could see the fire within her without fear or judgment. Azil's eyes caught hers again, and he studied her as though trying to read the unspoken truths she carried. "I do not ask this lightly," he said. "Choosing to stay here, choosing to share your life with me, it is not simple. This land does not forgive weakness, and life here does not forgive lies. If you come, you must bring your whole heart, your courage, your honesty. Nothing less will do." The weight of his words pressed on her, but strangely, they did not frighten her. They challenged her, sparked something fierce in her chest. Leora realized she had never been asked for all of herself before. People had always wanted her to fit their expectations, to work for their needs, to blend into the background. Here, someone asked her to step fully into herself, and though it was terrifying, it was also exhilarating. As the night deepened, Azil led her outside to the edge of the property, where the corral opened to the endless plains. The moonlight fell across the land in silver streaks, casting long shadows that danced like spirits among the grass. Horses grazed quietly, their silhouettes moving with graceful strength. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying faint scents of rain and distant mountains. "This land will test you," he said, his voice almost lost in the wind. "It will push you to limits you do not yet know. But it also gives more than you imagine. You must learn to listen, to see, to feel it in every bone, every heartbeat. Only then can you truly belong here." Leora shivered, not from the cold but from the intensity of the moment. She felt the enormity of the choice before her. The town, with its closed doors and empty promises, had shaped her, but this place, this man, offered something different, something raw, untamed, and deeply alive. Her heart thudded in a strange rhythm, part fear, part excitement, part longing she could not name. Azil's hand brushed lightly against hers, a gesture both casual and intimate. "You do not have to decide tonight," he said softly, "but you will not find another chance like this. Not here, not anywhere." Her mind swirled with questions. What did he mean by his cryptic warnings? Was this offer of love truly what it seemed, or was it a test she might fail? And even if she chose to stay, could she handle the loneliness, the harshness, the endless labor? Yet, as she looked into Azil's eyes, she saw more than warning. She saw patience, understanding, and a quiet hope that mirrored her own. The wind carried a distant howl across the plains, a reminder that the land was alive, untamed, and never fully predictable. Leora's heart tightened with anticipation. Here, at the edge of the world, in the fading light of day, she was standing on the precipice of something that could change everything: her future, her heart, her very life. Azil's gaze did not waver. "You have strength in you, even if you do not see it yet," he said. "I have waited a long time to meet someone who can endure this life, and perhaps teach me to endure it in ways I never have before." The night air thickened with tension, heavy with possibilities and unspoken truths. Leora felt the pull of the plains, the call of the wild, and the stirrings of her own heart toward something she could not yet name. She knew the next step would not be easy. She knew the road ahead would demand everything she had and perhaps more than she thought she could give. And yet, standing there with Azil, the Apache man who spoke of love as if it were a contract with the earth itself, she felt a spark of hope, fragile and fierce. The choice lingered between them, unresolved, a delicate thread stretched over the canyon of fear and desire. The story of the poor woman and the Apache rancher was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning. The stars blazed overhead, bright and distant, like silent witnesses to the life that waited just beyond the horizon. The night deepened, the ranch settled into quiet, and Leora's heartbeat echoed in the vast emptiness around them. Somewhere out there, beyond the fields and the shadows, her destiny waited, full of love, challenge, and the untamed promise of a life she had never dared to dream. And as the wind carried the scent of sage and earth, Azil and Leora stood together at the edge of the unknown, hearts full of tension, longing, and a question that could not yet be answered. Would she step into this new life, surrendering to the land, to him, and to the uncertain path of love? Or would the fear of the unknown drive her back to the world she had always known? The night held its breath, and the story waited, poised on the edge of revelation. The dawn broke slowly over Redstone Creek, painting the plains in soft shades of gold and amber. Leora woke on a small cot in the corner of Azil's cabin, the first light spilling across the rough wooden floorboards. She sat up, her mind still heavy with the choices of the night before. The offer Azil had made, simple yet impossible, weighed on her like the morning sun on the parched land outside. She knew she could not walk away, not yet, not when her heart throbbed with a strange mix of fear and hope. Outside, the ranch was alive. Horses neighed softly, their hooves stirring dust in the corral. The barn creaked as the morning chores began, a rhythm that spoke of routine, responsibility, and a life both simple and demanding. Leora stepped to the window, watching Azil move among the animals, his hands steady, precise, commanding respect without a word. There was a quiet power in him, an authority that came not from fear, but from knowledge and experience. He was a man shaped by hardship, yet untouched by cruelty. And yet there was a shadow behind his eyes, a hint of pain that he carried like a cloak. Leora's curiosity grew stronger with each passing moment. Who was this man really? Why did he live in isolation when the world outside offered so much more, or at least more comfort? And why had he offered her a place in his life so freely, yet with so many conditions? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the cabin door opening. Azil stepped inside, a small bundle of food in his hands. "I made something for you," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unspoken weight. "It's simple, but it will give you strength for the day." Leora accepted it silently, sensing the layers beneath his actions, the care, the caution, the hidden trust. As she ate, she watched him move around the cabin, organizing tools, checking the tack in the corner, his every motion precise and deliberate. She realized that this man's life was built around balance between work and survival, solitude and connection, discipline and freedom. And now, somehow, he was inviting her to step into that balance, to become a part of a life she did not yet fully understand. The morning passed slowly, filled with small tasks that Azil assigned to her. She cleaned the barn, fed the horses, and swept the porch, each task a test and a lesson. The work was hard, demanding more than she had expected, yet she felt a growing sense of belonging. The land, harsh and unyielding, seemed to accept her, and the quiet companionship of Azil, even without words, stirred something deep in her heart. As she worked, she noticed signs of the ranch's past old fences repaired with care, letters tucked away in a drawer, and a faded journal that seemed to belong to someone long gone. Curiosity overcame her hesitation, and she opened the journal, reading about a family who had loved the land fiercely, survived tragedy, and endured hardship with quiet dignity. Leora felt a connection she could not explain, a bond with people she had never met, and a deeper understanding of the man who had inherited this legacy. Azil watched her from a distance, noting the way her eyes lit up with discovery, the way her hands moved confidently even as they trembled with the effort of new labor. He had seen many come and go from his ranch, none willing to stay, none able to face the truth of the land and of him. But Leora was different. There was courage in her, yes, but also something more, a spark that could match his own solitude and perhaps challenge the walls he had built around his heart. Yet not all was quiet in Redstone Creek. Rumors from the town reached the edges of the ranch, whispers of land disputes, debts owed, and strangers who did not understand the ways of the wild plains. Some townsfolk regarded Azil with suspicion, others with envy. They whispered about the mysterious woman at his side, speculating about her intentions, her past, her future. Leora felt their judgment, a subtle pressure that reminded her the world outside was not yet ready to accept the life she was building here. One afternoon, a rider approached the ranch, dust swirling in his wake. He dismounted with a careful grace, tipping his hat to Azil with a mixture of respect and wariness. His name was Kynan, a land agent from the neighboring settlement, and his presence brought tension immediately. "Azil," he said, his voice formal, "we need to discuss the eastern boundaries. There's been talk of claims, and I have to make sure your land is secure." Azil's expression hardened, his usual calm replaced with a subtle intensity. "I've maintained my boundaries for years," he said, voice steady but firm. "I know the limits." "What exactly is the problem?" Kynan hesitated, glancing at Leora before speaking. "There's been movement, people surveying near your land. Some say there might be disputes. It's best to handle it now before it escalates." Leora felt a chill run through her. She had not expected conflict beyond the emotional tension she felt with Azil, but the world outside his ranch was slowly creeping in. She looked at him, searching his face for a hint of how he would handle this intrusion, and saw both strength and calculation. Azil had faced storms before, harsh weather, solitude, loss, but this was different. It was a threat to the fragile new life she was starting to imagine. As the day wore on, Leora tried to understand the dynamics of the ranch and the man who ruled it. She learned that Azil's quiet strength masked years of careful planning and a deep knowledge of the land. She also discovered that beneath his discipline was a man who longed for companionship, someone who wanted not just a helper but a partner, someone who could share the weight of both labor and emotion. The duality fascinated her, and her feelings grew more complex. Evenings were filled with long silences, where conversation seemed unnecessary. They worked together, side by side, communicating through gestures, shared understanding, and fleeting glances that carried unspoken meaning. Leora realized she was learning more about Azil through observation than through words. She began to anticipate his needs, understand his moods, and notice the subtle ways he revealed care, preparing a warm meal, covering her shoulders with a blanket when the night grew cold, or pausing to admire the sky with her without a word. And yet, questions remained. Why had he chosen her? What haunted him in the long hours of solitude? What challenges would the land or the town throw at them next? Leora could feel tension building not just between herself and Azil, but with the world around them. Every sound beyond the fence, every visitor from town, every unexplained movement in the distance was a reminder that their life was fragile, unprotected, and full of potential danger. As the sun set behind the western hills, casting long shadows across the ranch, Leora stood at the edge of the corral, feeling the wind tug at her hair and clothes. Her heart was full of questions, anticipation, and a longing she did not yet understand. Azil approached silently, standing beside her as they both gazed at the horizon, the air thick with unspoken emotion. "You've come far today," he said finally, voice low. "But the tests are just beginning. The land, the town, the choices you make, they will all demand more from you than you can imagine. Are you ready for that?" Leora did not answer immediately. She felt the weight of the question, the pull of destiny, and the fragile hope that had begun to bloom in her heart. She glanced at him, seeing not just a man of the land, but a man who carried the weight of the past, the present, and the uncertain future. She took a deep breath, letting the wind fill her lungs with courage. I don't know," she said honestly, her voice barely above the whisper of the evening breeze. "But I want to try." Azil's eyes softened, and for the first time a small, genuine smile appeared. "Then we begin," he said, "but remember, the path will not be easy. Every step will demand your strength, your courage, and your heart." The night closed in around them, stars shimmering like distant promises, and the ranch seemed alive with anticipation, as if aware that the story of Leora and Azil had only just begun. Conflicts awaited, secrets lingered, and love was not yet fully revealed. The tension between them, between the land and the world beyond, promised trials and triumphs alike, but the answers were still out of reach, waiting for the courage to meet them head-on. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and dust, and Leora felt the enormity of what lay ahead. The ranch, Azil, and the life she was daring to step into all demanded her commitment, yet held the promise of something more: love, belonging, and the chance to rewrite her own story under the vast, untamed sky. The wind howled across the plains as the first hints of a storm gathered in the distant hills. Dark clouds rolled over Redstone Creek, casting long shadows over the ranch and turning the golden fields into shades of gray. Leora stood near the edge of the corral, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the fence. The air smelled of rain and earth, sharp and alive, and she felt a mixture of excitement and fear tightening her chest. Everything about the ranch felt more intense in moments like this, the land, the animals, and especially Azil. Azil appeared behind her, his presence steady and commanding. The storm did not shake him. It seemed to bend around him, respecting the quiet strength he carried. "The clouds are coming faster than I expected," he said, voice low, almost as if the wind might steal his words. "We need to secure the barns and make sure the horses are safe." Leora nodded, feeling her heart beat faster, not just from the approaching storm, but from the closeness of Azil, the way his eyes met hers and seemed to look right into her soul. She followed him through the ranch, helping tie down tarps, check the gates, and calm the restless horses. Every movement was filled with tension, every glance between them charged with unspoken emotion. She realized that fear and desire could exist at the same time, and in that moment they were inseparable. After the work was done, they stood side by side on the porch, watching the first streaks of lightning split the horizon. Azil's hand brushed hers as he pointed toward the darkening plains. "The storm will test us," he said, his eyes serious. "Not just the land, but us. It will show what we're willing to endure for each other, for this life." Leora's heart tightened. She had faced hardship before, but never like this. This was not just the wind or the rain, it was the weight of the land, the judgment of the town, the tension between her desire to belong and the uncertainty of what she was stepping into. Yet there was something intoxicating about it, a pull she could not resist. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch damp and fragrant with the scent of wet earth. But new challenges awaited. Kynan returned from the town, his horse kicking up mud as he dismounted with urgent purpose. "Azil," he said, his voice tight, "there's been a claim filed against the eastern boundary. A new family says your land overlaps theirs. They're demanding settlement immediately." Azil's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. "I've surveyed these lands myself. They're mine. And I won't give in to threats or false claims." Leora watched him, feeling both admiration and concern. She knew Azil's pride and sense of justice would not allow compromise, yet the town's interference was growing. She wondered if she was ready for the storm of conflict that was fast approaching. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats and voices, outsiders arriving at the ranch, challenging everything Azil had built. A man stepped forward, tall and imposing, his eyes calculating and cold. "Azil," he said, voice smooth but hard, "we have evidence that this land rightfully belongs to us. Step aside, or we'll take legal action." Azil's gaze did not waver. "The land was surveyed, my family has lived here for generations, and I won't abandon it now. You can take your case to the courts, but my hands stay on this ranch." Leora's chest tightened as she realized the scale of the conflict. This was no longer just a personal challenge. This was a battle for the very life of the ranch, for the future Azil had offered her. Her hands clenched at her sides, torn between fear and a fierce determination to stand with him. Days passed with mounting tension. The town watched, rumors spreading like wildfire. Friends and neighbors whispered about the claim, about Leora's presence at the ranch, about Azil's stubbornness. Every interaction carried the weight of scrutiny, and every glance from a stranger reminded Leora that the world outside the ranch was as unforgiving as the land itself. Through it all, Azil remained calm, a steady anchor against the chaos. But Leora noticed the lines of strain forming on his face, the tightness in his shoulders when he thought no one was watching. She wanted to comfort him, to offer words that could ease the storm, but she was learning that some burdens were not easily shared. Instead, she worked beside him, silent but present, showing strength in ways that spoke louder than words. One evening, as the sun dipped behind jagged cliffs and painted the sky in fire and purple, a sudden cry broke the quiet. A horse had escaped, bolting toward the river that ran along the edge of the property. Leora's heart leapt and she ran, her legs carrying her faster than she thought possible. Azil followed, moving with the fluid grace of someone who knew the land intimately. The horse neared the edge of the riverbank, hooves skidding on the loose soil. Leora dove forward, grabbing the reins with desperate strength. Azil's hands joined hers, pulling together, the muscles in their arms straining as the animal resisted. In that moment time seemed suspended, the land, The stormy sky, the racing river, all held in tension with their shared effort. Finally, the horse stopped, trembling but safe. Leora collapsed against it, breathless, soaked from the spray of the river and her own exertion. Azil knelt beside her, his hands brushing wet strands of hair from her face. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared, the storm, the town, the claims, the uncertainty, all of it vanished into the intensity of that single, fragile moment. "You're fearless," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "And foolish, but fearless." Leora looked up at him, her chest still heaving, and felt something she had never felt before. A surge of belonging, of connection, of raw, untamed love. And yet, even as her heart soared, the storm of challenges remained Kainan's claims, the town's judgment, the whispers of outsiders, the fragile survival of the ranch. That night, they stood on the porch, the wind tugging at their clothes, the stars hidden behind clouds heavy with rain. Azil's hand found hers again, stronger this time, holding tightly as if neither could let go. "Tomorrow," he said, voice steady despite the tension in the air, "we face what comes, together, no matter what." Leora nodded, her heart both heavy and full. She realized that love and struggle were entwined here, as inseparable as the land and the sky. She could not predict the outcome, could not foresee whether they would triumph or be torn apart. But she knew one thing. She would stand beside him, whatever came, and the storm, both literal and figurative, would test every ounce of courage in her heart. The night stretched long, filled with wind and distant thunder, each sound a reminder of the challenges waiting in the morning. Leora lay awake, thinking of Azil, the ranch, the land she was beginning to call her own, and the storm of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Every fiber of her being was alert, ready, and uncertain. And as the ranch settled into uneasy quiet, as the stars hid behind the looming clouds, the story of Leora and Azil teetered on the edge of revelation, the climax yet to come. The love, the danger, the mysteries of the land all were poised to collide in ways neither of them could predict. The tension hung in the air, thick and unrelenting, as the night whispered of what was to come, and the plains held their breath, waiting for the moment when hearts and fates would meet. The storm would come, the claims would arrive, and their courage would be tested like never before. The ranch, the town, the land, and their hearts were all on the line. And in the quiet before the dawn, Leora realized she had never been more alive, nor more afraid. The dawn broke soft and golden over the plains, the storm of the night before having passed, leaving the world refreshed and calm. The ranch lay bathed in a quiet light, the wet earth glistening, the scent of sage and damp grass hanging in the air. Leora stepped outside, feeling the cool breeze on her face, her heart still racing from the events of the past days. Every challenge, every storm, every whispered threat from the town had led to this moment, and she realized that she had grown stronger because of it. Azil appeared beside her, his boots pressing softly into the mud, his expression calm but triumphant. "We weathered it," he said, voice steady, though his eyes held a warmth that rarely showed to anyone. "The claim has been withdrawn. They knew the land could not be taken, and the town has finally accepted the truth. Your presence, your courage, made a difference." Leora's chest swelled with relief, and a small smile broke across her face. She thought of the long nights of labor, the moments of doubt, the fear of losing not just the ranch, but the life she was beginning to build with Azil. And now, the tension that had pressed on them like a heavy weight had lifted, replaced with the quiet joy of triumph. They walked together along the fence line, the horses grazing peacefully in the corral. Leora reached out to brush a hand along the mane of a chestnut mara, and Azil's hand found hers again. This time the touch was unhurried, gentle, full of meaning. She realized that in facing the storms both literal and figurative, they had discovered a trust deeper than words, a bond that had grown stronger with every trial. "The land tests everyone who comes here," Azil said. Eyes on the horizon where the first light of morning sparkled across the plains. "But it also rewards those who endure, who fight for it, who care for it with all their heart. And so do we, Leora. You have proven yourself, not just to me, but to the land itself." Leora felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the fullness of her emotions, love, pride, relief, and a deep sense of belonging she had never known. She had come seeking work, seeking a place to survive, and she had found more than she had ever imagined. She had found home. She had found someone who saw her for all that she was, someone whose life could intertwine with hers in ways that were honest, raw, and enduring. The town began to feel smaller, less imposing. Kainen's warnings, the whispers of outsiders, the fear of losing the ranchal of it faded into memory, replaced with the quiet rhythms of life on the land. Leora helped Azil with the morning chores, not as a worker seeking approval, but as a partner fully invested in a shared future. Every action, every gesture carried significance, and every glance between them spoke of a love that had endured challenge and emerged stronger. One afternoon, Azil led Leora to a small grove near the edge of the ranch, a place he had kept secret for years. The trees arched high, leaves rustling softly in the breeze, sunlight dappled across the ground like scattered gold. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, voice quiet, reverent. "It's where I feel closest to my family, to those who came before me, and to the land itself. I want you to share it with me now." Leora stepped into the grove, feeling the cool shade and the warmth of the sun filtering through the branches. She looked at Azil, seeing the man he was beyond the rancher, the man shaped by love, loss, courage, and quiet resilience. Her heart swelled with a longing she no longer tried to suppress. "I want to be here," she said softly, her hand brushing his. "With you. On this land. In your life." Azil's eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed himself to smile fully, the shadows of solitude finally lifting. "Then stay," he said, voice steady, carrying the weight of promise. "Not because I ask, but because you choose. That is the only way this can be real." They spent the day together in the grove, sharing stories of their pasts, their fears, their dreams. Leora spoke of her childhood, of the hardships she had faced, of the longing for a place to belong. Azil spoke of his family, the weight of the land, and the loneliness that had accompanied his years of solitude. And through their words, a connection deepened, the kind that grew not from circumstance alone, but from understanding and trust. Evening fell, and they returned to the cabin, the sky painted with shades of amber, rose, and violet. Leora felt a peace she had never known, a sense that the storms both in the world and in her heart had passed. Yet she also knew that life on the plains would always demand vigilance, courage, and resilience. That knowledge did not frighten her. It made her feel alive. They stood together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Azil's arm brushed hers, a simple gesture that carried the weight of shared triumphs and hard-won trust. "Life will always have challenges," he said, eyes on the distant hills. "But together we can face anything. This land, this ranch, and this life, it's ours to protect, ours to cherish, and ours to love." Leora leaned into him, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I never imagined I could find something like this," she said, voice soft. "A place, a home, a heart to share it with. You've given me more than I ever thought possible." Azil pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and grounding. "And you've given me hope I thought was lost," he replied. "This life, this love, it's better because you're in it. We are stronger together than we could ever be apart." The stars appeared in the deepening night sky, bright and steady, witnesses to the love and courage that had grown in the face of hardship. The ranch settled into quiet, the wind whispering softly across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of many days to come. Leora and Azil stood together, hearts aligned, knowing that the land had tested them, the world had challenged them, and yet here they were united, triumphant, and full of hope. In the coming days, the town's whispers softened, the claim had been resolved, and life returned to a rhythm that was both hard and beautiful. Leora continued to learn the ways of the ranch, her hands strong, her heart brave, her spirit full of love. Azil continued to guide, protect, and cherish her, their partnership growing into a bond that could weather any storm. The ranch thrived, the land blossomed under their care, and the small community around them began to see what true partnership looked like: resilience, trust, love, and courage. And at night, when the work was done and the stars shone brightly overhead, Leora and Azil would sit together on the porch, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony, knowing that the trials they had faced had only made their love stronger, their lives richer, and their future brighter. The plains stretched endlessly before them, wild and untamed, yet filled with promise. And in that promise, Leora understood what she had been seeking all along, not just work, not just survival, but belonging, love, and a life built together with someone who understood the heart as deeply as the land itself. The storms had come, the conflicts had raged, and the fears had threatened to pull them apart. But in the end, love, courage, and faith in one another had prevailed. The ranch, the land, and their hearts were safe, and the horizon glowed with the warmth of a new day, a new life, and the enduring power of a love that had been tested and had endured. Leora rested her head against Azil's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the peace of a future finally within reach. "We made it," she whispered. "Yes," he said, voice full of warmth and certainty. "Together, we made it." And for the first time in a long time, the plains felt endless in the most beautiful way, full of life, love, and the promise of everything yet to come. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice.